Wow. It's first of all, please allow me to thank and appreciate the New Horizons School for holding this event and for being keen to hold it every year in the presence of excellence. I'm deeply honored to have been selected to be the recipients of this appreciation award this year. And I'm sincerely grateful for the recognition of my work and my activism in climate change and environmental sustainability. It's very rare. Like I was just talking to a few board members here. It's very rare that what my work is recognized by Muslims. I told them that usually it's the non-Muslim the one who. So I was very surprised, and this is my honor. It's such an honor. And I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation to Ms. Yolanda Hussein, the school principals, for her enthusiasm and also the effort to bring forth the importance of Muslim leadership and engagement in protecting the environment and combating climate change. Because environment has become a subject of interest in the recent years, as we just saw earlier from Dr. Jamil's presentation. And however, the idea of conserving the environment as we understood today is relatively new, having emerged as a matter of concern to the human race about 6 decades ago. Why is that? Because human beings realized that their behavior and activities were increasing and threatening the balance, what he mentioned earlier, Mizan, the balance of the natural world. So the main two causes of that is the rapid population and also the increase of global economic activities, which we see is consuming a lot of our Earth resources. And as we cross our path, what we call now progress, it leaves us on a trail of destruction that threatens our own existence and our own survival. But when we look at the Islamic teaching and traditions, as we already experienced today from the earlier presentation, it speaks about environment or conservation in the sense of, not in the sense of what we understand today. So, because until recently, approximately 100 or 200 years ago, the entire human race lived in the natural state and evolved traditions on their own for hundreds or even like thousands of years, and they live in harmony with nature. So probably like our grandparents were still living like that. So it's not that far off. But as we see today, we are completely different than the way our grandparents lived. So unfortunately, this wonderful tradition have now been undermined. And I'm so glad that Dr. Jamil mentioned about rainforest. So for example, rainforest. Rainforest is the sign of Allah creation. What we call in Islam as ayat of Allah in nature, or ayatul kauniyah, right? So the stability when left undisturbed of this rainforest is a demonstration of balance in nature, the balance of creation, and it's the pattern of our creator, Allah. So the rainforest is not a playground. It's not a playground. So a part of sustaining the varieties of living beings within its boundary, it supplies oxygen that we breathe in and also store the carbon dioxide. And by performing that, the rainforest actually submit to the will of Allah. That's how nature works. So in that matter, the Quran actually uses the language of natural state, or the fitrah, as we know it. So this earth, besides just there for us, it's also a gift from Allah that bestowed upon humankind. So if we fail to keep this trust, this is an amana, it's a trust for us to care that he placed us as the guardian, the Khalifa upon this earth. And if we fail and then we don't take care of it justly, and also we did destruction or corruption, and that would deny the future generation to have that benefit, then we are failed as the whole humankind, human society. So I want to share a little bit story about myself. So when I returned home from United States to Indonesia in 1998, after I finished my study here for several years, I had this vision about designing a Medina, an Islamic village or like Islamic city, which I realized that's an eco village. But back then, without knowing what it took to accomplish such, not until in 2001 when I was working at that time as a regional planner, and I had to work with this amazing geological team. And from them, I learned a lot about earth structure and also the movement of the earth, which made me realize that the importance of understanding the geological knowledge for my professional field of designing towns and cities. Because if you know where Indonesia is, we are located in the what is called Ring of Fires. So we have like 3 plates of the earth that is shaking our existence over there. So it was very important to understand that. And then without knowing, actually, there's another challenge that was presented to me a few years later after that. In early 2005, as mentioned in the introduction, that I was called by the World Wildlife Fund, which is the largest environmental conservation organization, to aid a relief effort in Aceh, the northern tip of Sumatra. Most of you probably are familiar with the tsunami that was struck in the Indian Ocean in the late of December 2004. So back then I was ready to lead a green reconstruction effort, but found myself having a tough time persuading the local community to take sustainability into consideration for their rebuilding efforts. So some of my colleagues noted my struggle that I was working in that region, which is actually the region of Aceh, it's predominantly deep religious Muslims. So then they made suggestion, why don't you use the Islamic narratives as a way to find a common ground with the people, with the local community. So up to that point, I've never seen the connection. So I ended up going back to the Quran, to the Sunnah, to look for environmental messages. And to my own surprise, I was so overwhelmed because I found so many of them. So I started to connect the dots between environmental stewardship, being the Khalifa, that I'm supposed to catalyze that on my work, and also like the faith that I share with this community is Al-Islam. So alhamdulillah, the people start to understood better, and then I actually use Islamic teaching to emphasize my point, and I started to engage with the local ulama, with the imams, and then people started to get involved in the program. So from then on, whether I work in sustainable cities or climate change issues, I always incorporate the Islamic teaching and tradition. And to be very honest, this challenge is actually enhanced my own awareness and increased my own passion in the field of nature balance and ecological sustainability. And during that time, I was so fortunate enough to gain knowledge and insights from mentors, leaders, from experts, which I call them now as my friend on this journey. So, and this passion has made me realize that I was practicing my own deen, my own faith, my own Islamic faith all along, that has been inculcated in me during my youth by my parents, because my mom, she's always like into planting herbs, medicinal herbs or trees. And then my dad always always conscious about saving the water for future generation. And all my teachers from kindergartens, elementary to high school, they all somehow taught me that all human beings are the guardians upon this earth, the Khalifa upon this earth, and we should live in it in harmony. So fast forward, in 2012, after I got married with my wonderful husband, I moved back here to California, in San Diego to be exact, and just 3 weeks, that time, 3 weeks before Ramadan started. And a week later, after I was done with my jet lag, I received a phone call from the late Sister Taiba Taylor, rahimahullah. She was the founder of Aziza magazine in Atlanta. She asked me to write an article about climate change for the next year issue on the green living and Muslim women in environmental movement. So I agree with that request. But then the magazine also decided that they wanted to feature me as well. So there I was in the cover of Aziza magazine in the summer of 2013, and the sister actually recognized me today. I'm a little bit embarrassed, but I'm like, because sometimes people recognize, I've seen you before, and I said like, no, you never seen me, and then they realize, oh, you're in the magazine. So, but let me go back a little bit. So when I was, that time when I arrived right before Ramadan, so I attended the iftar in Ramadan that year in 2012. And I noticed that the community used a lot of disposable dishwares or utensils and threw away a lot of food. I'm so glad today we actually use this, not disposable. Yes. So that time it really bothered me, and I complained a lot when I got home to my husband, and he said, "Why don't you talk to the imam?" I said, okay. So then the opportunity presented to me several months later. I convinced Imam Taha Hassan of Islamic Center of San Diego to let me share my story on environmental sustainability and climate change activism. And I said, I promised him I'm going to present it from the Islamic perspective. So I did my first green talk in the masjid on the Earth Day of April 2013. And I also mentioned to the community then, how about like having Ramadan with environmental conscious? Let's have Green Ramadan this year. So Imam Taha mentioned that to other imams and other masajid in San Diego and encouraged them to invite me to talk to their community. So there I was, talking from masjid to masjid about environment and Islam and environment. And alhamdulillah, several masajid in San Diego in 2013 started the Green Ramadan. And also that same year, the late Sister Taiba from Aziza magazine managed to convene Islamic Society of North America, ISNA, to allow me to present about Islam, what Islam teaches on protecting the earth in one of the sessions during the ISNA annual convention in Washington, D.C. That was also like a rare occasion, like never, like they have that kind of green session. So, and that at the same time, also Green Faith recognized me and then asked me to join their 18 months fellowship program. So I accepted the challenge and dived in even deeper by working with other faith leaders and community. So I've always been passionate about, environmental work or climate justice work, because I feel like my deen compels me to protect the earth. As Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah has made the earth green and beautiful, and He appointed you as the steward, the guardian upon it. This prophetic teaching urges us Muslims to be ambassadors of our earth and to do what it takes to protect it. And there's no greater threat of our green and beautiful earth than the more frequent drought, floods, storm, and wildfire brought by climate change. And as an Indonesian-born Muslim currently living here in Southern California, I've seen firsthand the impact of climate change, both in my native home country in Indonesia with severe floods and sea level rise, as well as my new adopted home in California with the drought and wildfire. You all know about that. And back in 2009, when I started this involvement with climate change, I was selected to be trained by former Vice President Al Gore in Melbourne, Australia, to join the climate movement. And last year, during the same training in Denver, that he gave this training like a lot, like 3 times or 4 times a year. And so I was invited to the one in Denver last year, and I was invited to share a stage with him to share my stories in front of the 1,000 participants at that time in combating climate change and promoting sustainability, sustainable living. And then that prompted him to actually ask me to be featured in his latest book that was mentioned, Truth to Power. We should all get that book. We can get a lot of different people from different part of the world, like sharing their story, how they were involved, how they are involved in this movement. And it's not all pretty stories. There's a lot of struggle. We go through a lot of struggle. So when we see the news nowadays, right, from the cropless farmer to the struggling first responder to the first person forced to evacuate their flooded home or their, like home caught on fire, like here in California, we all have our reason to care for caring about climate change. Sea level rise are making the world part of the world at risk of disappearing into sea. I came from an archipelagic country, so I know that. But we are very fortunate because in Indonesia we had 17,000 islands. So like 3,000 islands, like disappeared, no problem, right? But what happened to Maldives? Maldives is a Muslim country too, but Maldives is already in the UN climate convention that predicted by scientists that they're going to be not too long. It's going to be under the water. So that's like our concern. And on the opposite side, the earth is becoming parched and dry, making it less suitable for further cultivation. In fact, global warming doesn't affect only the temperature of our planet, but also affect the storms around the world. We have experienced this last year in this country. We saw the big storms that happened in Florida, in Texas, but also we experienced the forest fire. And climate change has undeniably affected many vulnerable communities as more and more disasters are happening and rapidly around the globe. And many of our Muslim brothers and sisters around the world live in areas severely affected by climate change impacts, like heat waves, floods, droughts, extreme weather events from Pakistan to Somalia to Bangladesh and so on. So as Muslims, we are obligated by our own faith, our own deen, and by our shared humanity to stand up and fight for them and for all people suffering from the effects of climate change, wherever, whenever, and however we can. And I'm encouraging all of you to do the same. As Muslim, we understand that in the Quran, as the title of Dr. Jamil, I love that title because I use that a lot too. Allah calls us to walk gently upon this earth. What is the meaning of that? The meaning is like we are bound by our moral imperative to treat our shared common home, our earth, with the care and respect it deserves. A teaching that many other faiths also share. So the reality of climate change not only has a grave implication for the future of our planet, but also represent one of the great moral and ethical issue of our time. The earth indeed is in a devastated state. Greenhouse gases is in the atmosphere from our overuse fossil fuel is creating a crisis of epidemic proportions. So, as mentioned earlier, in August 2015, just a couple months after the Pope Francis actually released his encyclical, which is called Laudato Si, or Care for Our Common Home, the International Islamic Climate Change Symposium was held in Istanbul, Turkey, and brought about unprecedented cooperation to develop a groundbreaking declaration calling all Muslims, including governments, businesses, activists, people of Islamic faith, and also with other faiths, to take more ambitious action and lead the way in transformation to a fossil-free, renewable energy power world. And after the symposium, the key organization that facilitated that process agreed to establish the Global Muslim Climate Network in April 2015, which I'm co-chairing right now. So the network overall goal is to build a strong Muslim representative in the climate in the climate negotiation and discussion platform around the world, and will collaborate to successfully influence Muslim majority country decision maker, while also raising awareness with our grassroots community as well as our masjid, our mosques around the world, to build on positive action and projects initiated in the declaration, such as transformation from fossil fuel towards 100% renewable energy. What does it mean? Like, for example, we have right now the campaign on Eco Mosque or Green Mosque, where we actually promoting the use of solar panel, the solar energy for our mosque. And there's some already, like the masjid in San Diego, Islamic Center of San Diego, after 3 years talking and presenting to the community, finally the board agreed, okay, let's do it. And now they already have it. So like you will see it in the Al Gore's book, like my story on that. And also in Indonesia, we just launched last November EcoMos national program, which is trying to install solar panel to 1,000 masjid by 2020. So we are hoping other countries, I'm working with my colleagues in Pakistan now, we'll see like how we can implement that. And also not only that, we want to also engage on the role of Islamic finance on the transition of implementing sustainable development goals. Why? Because as Muslim, we have our own financial systems. We have the Waqf system, we have Zakat, Infaq Sadaqah. Right. In fact, Waqf system is the least used Islamic financial method that is, that is like almost forgotten. So we're trying to revive that and trying to use the Waqf system on this venue. And in fact, the program, the EcoMos in Indonesia, we are developing the solar Waqf, so the energy Waqf. So like how can people like do Waqf with their on the energy, like clean energy in this case. Because the current rate of climate change can no longer be sustained, and the Earth's fine balance, the mizan of this Earth, may soon be lost. And what will the future generations say of us? Who leaves them a degraded planet as our legacy? And most importantly, how will we face our Creator? How do we face Allah if we don't do anything? So isn't it about time we ask ourselves how we are contributing to this crisis and what can we do to reverse this process? So we urgently need to return to our natural states as human beings, to our fitrah. And one of the best way I found to protect the environment is to teach children to love and appreciate nature. Children by nature love nature. Connecting with nature also helps children engage all their senses. It is the perfect environment in which to learn, to explore, inspire creativity, and just let children be children. And for children, spending time outdoor is a vital part of growing up. But unfortunately, the disconnect between children and nature is also one of the greatest challenge of our time. According to the National Wildlife Federation, the average American child has only spent 4 to 7 minutes of unstructured outdoor play each day and spends more than 7 hours staring at TV, computer, or phone screen. So 7 hours to 7 minutes, that's a big gap. And in addition to that, the University of Michigan research study found that from 2002 to 2003, 6 to 7 years old in the US spend 50 minutes on average on outdoor activities each week. Compare that to 1 hour 40 minutes reported by children the same age in the years of 1981 to 1982. So this is very alarming. The author Richard Louv, in his book Last Child in the Woods, mentioned that this sense of isolation is radically affecting our children. According to him, it is harming their physical and mental health and hampering their creativities. In fact, he used the phrase NDD, which is nature deficit disorder, to describe the phenomenon. I also suggest, recommend that book, especially for teachers and educators and parents to read that, because it's very powerful. And the recent article in the Washington Post reported that time in nature will become increasingly important as more and more Americans move to cities. And the World Health Organization predicts that 70% of world population will live in urban area within 30 years. So that's just tomorrow. 30 years is not that long. So how do we encourage our children to connect and appreciate nature? Well, we start when they're young. I love to see them, I saw all the slides, photos of their activities, and getting them engaged on this since they're very young, and encourage them to play in the garden, for example, or let them study and play with leaves, with rocks, with flowers, and teach them names of trees, insects, birds, animals. And if you love yourself spending time outdoor, it's even easier to help your children develop this love as well. Another great way to help children connect to nature is to get them help you in the garden, or let them get dirty and dig the soil and discover insects, worms, and other creatures, and allow them to plant some vegetables. Children love that, because I saw it. They just it's just amazing for them to see every something pops up, and show them how to care for plants as they grow and they develop. And this is a wonderful opportunity for them to learn about nature at first hand. And also you can, if you have a backyard, you can have, a bird or feeders in the garden, so then they can have some, hobby also. And once in a while, take them to wildlife sanctuary or national park, or just plan a picnic outdoor, or do hiking or do other outdoor activities. We can encourage our children to observe their surrounding, let them draw what they see, awaken their curiosity, and teach them to observe nature and take notes on what they notice. And most importantly, make prayers, do salat outdoor in nature with them. Teach them how to make wudu in nature and not to waste water.
That's right.
So I was talking to Sister Pamela earlier
That's right.
about why we waste a lot of water. So I introduced this, I gave a talk to the school in San Diego, and a week, for Earth Day, and then a week later, the teacher called me, the students want to have a green club. What do we do with that? So this is the children, the student want it. It's not the teacher. So it's not the teacher pushing them to, okay, go have a green club. No, this is the children. So I said, okay, let's make, this is an Islamic school. So I said, let's make a voodoo challenge. So we made the voodoo challenge, with the small cups or bottle. So it was fun. I mean, like, children love it because, like, who can make voodoo with this much of water? And it's like a challenge. So you can have like a lot of fun with that. And tell them that Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said Allah has made the earth as a masjid for us. So we can make salah anywhere in nature. That means we have to take care of the earth, make sure it is clean and pure, just like we take care of our masjid, not dirty and not polluted. So we need to teach our children to love animals and plants as they are the creation of Allah. They are other creatures that we have to have also rahmah with them, because Allah has appointed us to take care of them as their as the guardian upon this earth. So with the current ecological crisis and climate change, we need to tackle this through collaborative efforts, and we all in this fight together, regardless of race, religion, creed, or country of origin, because we are living on the same earth, and we need to ensure that we do everything possible to protect our earth, our common home for the future generation, and to leave this world a better place than we found it. So in closing, I'm hopeful that we will win this struggle when we embrace each other and work together. All countries around the world right now, except the United States, have agreed to set or share targets on climate change, and they have committed to implement the Paris Climate Agreement. And so let us all unite to protect our environment and work with each other to bring about the solution to heal and protect our earth.
I mean.
Thank you.